Once he signs the papers, it's over. Those 6 words destroyed 34 years of marriage. I wasn't supposed to hear them. I had stepped back into the house because I'd forgotten my reading glasses. As I reached the hallway, I heard my wife's voice drift from the kitchen. She thought I had already left for my doctor's appointment. Once he signs the papers, it's over, she whispered confidently. The house will finally be mine. His savings too. He'll never recover. My son laughed. He trusts you too much, Mom. My daughter added. Dad never questions anything. He's always been too soft. I stood frozen behind the wall. The family I had sacrificed everything for was planning to erase me. They didn't know one thing. 3 weeks earlier, I'd already discovered the first piece of their betrayal and quietly changed everything. My name is David. I'm 68 years old, and until recently, I believed a father's job was to protect his family, no matter the cost. That belief nearly destroyed my life. I worked 42 years as an electrical engineer. Long hours, weekend shifts, countless birthdays missed because overtime meant another mortgage payment, another school trip, another opportunity for my children. My wife, Linda, always reminded everyone how hard motherhood had been. Nobody mentioned who paid for everything. Whenever the children wanted something expensive, Linda would sigh dramatically. Go ask your father. He'll figure it out. And I always did. I sold my motorcycle so my son could attend university. I emptied my investment account so my daughter could have her dream wedding. I delayed retirement because Linda wanted a larger kitchen. Every sacrifice seemed worth it because I believed we were building a future together. I couldn't have been more wrong. Our son, Brian, had always been the favorite. If he failed an exam, it was the teacher's fault. If he crashed his car, someone else caused the accident. If he lost another job, his boss was jealous. At 40 years old, Brian still expected everyone else to solve his problems. Linda happily did. Your father has savings, she'd tell him. He doesn't mind helping, except she never asked me. She simply volunteered my money. Our daughter, Melissa, wasn't much different. She constantly compared herself to wealthier friends and expected me to fund the lifestyle she believed she deserved. Dad, she'd smile sweetly. It's only a small loan. The loans were never repaid. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering somehow became another opportunity for them to ask for money. I noticed something else over the years. Whenever I accomplished something, nobody cared. When Brian managed to hold a job for 3 months, everyone celebrated. When Melissa paid one credit card bill, Linda called inspiring. When I paid off our entire mortgage, silence. One evening I quietly asked Linda, does anyone appreciate what I've done for this family? She didn't even look up from her phone. Why are you being dramatic? Providing is what fathers do. That sentence stayed with me. Providing is what fathers do. Apparently, appreciation wasn't. After retirement, I finally had time to enjoy life. Or so I thought. Instead, the request became larger. Brian wanted me to guarantee another business loan. Melissa needed money for an investment that sounded suspiciously like gambling. Linda insisted we renovate the entire house again. Every conversation revolved around what I could give, never how I felt. 3 months before everything collapsed, I visited my bank to update some paperwork. The manager, Mr. Collins, looked unusually concerned. Mr. Harrison, have you authorized recent inquiries regarding transferring ownership of your property? I frowned. What inquiries? He hesitated. Someone claiming to represent your wife requested information. My stomach tightened. Linda had never mentioned anything. When I asked her that evening, she smiled too quickly. Oh, it was nothing. Just asking general questions. General questions. That phrase echoed in my mind. For the first time in decades, I didn't believe my wife. Instead of confronting her further, I quietly hired a solicitor. What I learned shattered me. Linda had been meeting privately with a divorce solicitor. She wasn't preparing for separation. She was preparing for complete financial destruction. Because most of our assets remained jointly owned, she intended to pressure me into signing a financial settlement without independent advice. Even worse, Brian and Melissa were helping her. The solicitor showed me evidence of emails discussing how emotional I'd become after retirement. One message from Brian read, Dad feels guilty about everything. Just make him think the divorce is his fault. He'll sign. Melissa replied. After we sell the house, we can all split the money. Split the money. My life's work had become their inheritance before I was even gone. I drove home in silence. I parked outside the house and cried harder than I had at either of my parents' funerals. Not because I feared losing money, because I'd realized I had never truly known my own family. The next morning, I stopped being predictable. Without telling anyone, I transferred my personal savings into protected accounts only I controlled. I updated every legal document. I separated investments acquired before marriage. Most importantly, I rewrote my will. Every penny that represented my lifetime of personal earnings would no longer reward greed. Instead, it would create scholarships for children whose parents actually loved them. Only a small amount remained for each member of my family. Enough to show I hadn't forgotten them. Not enough to reward betrayal. I told nobody. Then I waited. The acting inside my own home became unbearable. Linda suddenly cooked my favorite meals. Brian visited every weekend. Melissa started calling me the best dad ever. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed them. One evening, Linda placed several documents on the dining table. We need to discuss our future. I looked at the papers. Divorce documents. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. David, we're simply growing apart. Growing apart? Yesterday she'd kissed me goodbye. Today she wanted everything. I've already spoken with professionals, she continued gently. If you sign these tonight, everything can stay civil. Brian leaned against the kitchen doorway. Dad, don't make this difficult. Melissa nodded dramatically. Please don't embarrass the family. Embarrass the family? The people trying to steal my future were worried about embarrassment. I slowly picked up the pen. Linda smiled. She thought she'd already won. She had absolutely no idea. The real game had ended weeks ago. I held the pen over the papers just long enough for all three of them to believe I had surrendered. Linda watched my hand with barely concealed excitement. Brian folded his arms with that smug grin he always wore when he thought he'd outsmarted someone. Melissa already looked like she was mentally redecorating my living room. I signed, not because they had won, because they had already lost. Linda quickly gathered the documents, trying to hide the smile spreading across her face. Thank you, David, she said softly. This is the best decision for everyone. For everyone? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Within 48 hours, she moved into the master bedroom alone and treated me like an unwanted guest in my own home. Brian came over almost daily, measuring rooms and discussing renovations. We should knock down this wall, he said. Melissa laughed and turned Dad's study into a walk-in wardrobe. I was sitting 10 feet away. Neither of them cared. A week later, Linda announced a family dinner. I've invited everyone, she said. It's time to tell the family our exciting news. Exciting. That was the word she used to describe the end of our marriage. My brother, sister, cousins, neighbors, and several close family friends arrived that evening. Linda stood in the middle of the dining room holding a glass of champagne. I have an announcement. Everyone became quiet. David and I have officially finalized our divorce. A few people looked shocked. Then Linda smiled. I'll be keeping the house, and we'll finally be able to move forward. Brian immediately raised his glass. Congratulations, Mom. Melissa hugged her dramatically. You deserve this after everything you've been through. Everything she'd been through. I'd spent decades working 12-hour shifts while she enjoyed holidays, shopping trips, and lunches with friends. But nobody asked for my side. Instead, whispers spread around the room. Poor Linda. David must have been difficult. I heard retirement changed him. Every lie they had told was working exactly as planned. Then Brian couldn't resist one final insult. Looking directly at me, he laughed. Dad, don't worry. We'll make sure you find a nice little flat somewhere. Several people chuckled. My own son had just publicly reduced my entire life to a joke. I slowly stood. May I say something? Linda sighed dramatically. David, please don't make a scene. I smiled. I'm not the one making a scene. I reached in my briefcase and placed 3 sealed envelopes on the dining table. One for Linda, one for Brian, one for Melissa. I think you should open these. Brian rolled his eyes. What is this? Another lecture? No, I replied calmly. It's your future. Linda opened hers first. The color disappeared from her face almost instantly. What is this? Brian tore open his envelope. His confident smile vanished. Melissa stared silently at her letter before looking at me in complete disbelief. No, she whispered. The room became silent. My solicitor's letter explained everything. 3 weeks before Linda asked me to sign the divorce papers, I had legally protected every personal investment, every retirement account, every inheritance from my late parents, and every asset acquired before our marriage. The financial settlement she celebrated only included what the law required, not the fortune she believed she'd secured. The biggest surprise came next. I removed another document from my briefcase. My updated will. Brian looked confused. What does your will matter? It matters because you were counting on it. I handed copies to everyone present. Linda grabbed hers with trembling hands. As she read, tears formed in her eyes. No, I spoke clearly enough for the entire room. Since my children believed I was worth more dead than alive, I decided my life's work should help people capable of gratitude. Every major asset I personally owned would now fund scholarships for children from struggling families. Thousands of future students would receive opportunities my own children had taken for granted. Brian slammed his copy onto the table. You can't do this. Already did. Melissa began crying. Dad, we didn't mean it. I looked directly into her eyes. You discussed selling my home before I was even gone. She couldn't deny it, because I had proof. I connected my phone to the television in the living room. Several relatives looked confused. Then the recording began. It was crystal clear. Linda's voice. Once he signs the papers, it's over. Brian laughed. He trusts you too much. Melissa added the words that had haunted me for weeks. After we sell everything, we'll split the money. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My cousin covered her mouth. One of Linda's closest friends slowly stepped away from her. The neighbors stared in complete disbelief. Brian rushed toward the television. Turn that off. I calmly pressed pause. No. Then I played another recording. It contained several conversations I'd legally recorded inside my own home after discovering their plan. Every insult, every scheme, every joke about how easy I would be to manipulate, every discussion about spending my money before I was even out of the house. By the time the final recording ended, the silence was unbearable. Linda collapsed into a chair. David, please. Her confident smile had disappeared forever. My older brother finally spoke. I defended you for years, Linda. She couldn't even look at him. One by one, relatives began leaving. Nobody congratulated Linda anymore. Nobody celebrated Brian. Nobody comforted Melissa. Instead, they apologized to me. I should have asked her side. I'm so sorry. We believed the lies. Brian suddenly dropped to his knees. Dad, please don't cut us out. It was the first time I'd seen him humble himself. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't because he loved me. It was because he had lost everything he expected to inherit. Linda reached for my hand. We can fix this. I gently stepped back. No, Linda, I made a mistake. No, I replied. You made hundreds of choices. There was a difference. Over the following months, reality caught up with all of them. Brian's business failed because nobody trusted him after the recordings spread throughout the family. Melissa had to sell her expensive car and move into a small rented flat after running out of money. Linda discovered that keeping part of the house meant paying bills she had always expected me to cover. For the first time in decades, she had to live with the consequences of her own decisions. As for me, I sold my share of the property, bought a peaceful cottage overlooking a quiet lake, and finally retired the way I'd always dreamed. The Scholarship Foundation launched the following spring. At the opening ceremony, I met the first group of students whose futures would be changed by the money my children thought belonged to them. One young boy shook my hand and said, "Sir, you've given me a chance my family never could." Those words meant more than any apology I would ever receive. Months later, Brian sent another message asking if we could start over. Melissa wrote that she missed me. Linda mailed a handwritten letter saying she finally understood everything I had sacrificed. I wished them peace. But forgiveness didn't require giving them another opportunity to break my heart. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't taking everything from the people who betrayed you. It's making sure they spend the rest of their lives watching someone else build a better future with the opportunities they threw away. As I sat on my porch one quiet evening, watching the sun disappear behind the lake, I realized something I wish I'd understood years earlier. A father's greatest success isn't measured by how much he leaves his family. It's measured by knowing when to stop rewarding those who never valued him in the first place. And for the first time in a very long time, I was finally free.